This happened to me quite a while ago, but I still remember it as if it was yesterday. I'm a female, and back then I was working in a call center. I used to work the night shift there, occasionally. Due to the fact that the company wasn't a big one, more of a startup, the bosses could only justify one employee working the night shift alone. It was tough. I remember calling my boss regularly because I was unsure of what to do alone at night there. It brought me to the verge of tears sometimes. I remember on occasion crying on the phone to him. After some time, I managed to get to grips with the night shift and my role in the company. It was a couple of months into my employment that the day in question arrived. That night, everything was going smoothly. I was working with a part-timer, and he came over to my desk to let me know he was leaving. During the day shift, the call center is filled with people and it gets noisy, but at night, the call center is deathly quiet and is quite unsettling. All the lights are off except the one section you're working in. The rest of the building is dark. It's incredibly isolating. Sometimes faxes would come through from a customer. I would race over to the fax, grab the paper, then run back to the safety of the light. It always scared me. I was always scared that someone could be hiding behind one of the desks or the machines. It got to about 1 AM and I was tidying everything away, relieved that another night shift was finally over. I put the key in the door to unlock it and let myself out when I heard a strange noise. It was the sound of water, like a toilet flushing or something. It came from behind me. I stared towards the toilets behind me. Instantly I thought, it's just a part-time worker. But then I realized after a second or two that he had gone home about 2 hours ago. I tried to calm myself. I thought perhaps that it might have been another employee from another company on the floor below. I knew deep down that there wasn't anyone else in this building working this late though. And I knew that that sound came from the bathroom on my floor. The bathroom which still had the lights out in. I stood there staring at the bathroom's frosted window, thinking about what to do next. Then I remembered something else. That bathroom has a sensor. You have to hover your hand in front of it to activate the flush. That meant that there was definitely someone in there. There was no doubt about it in my mind. I froze on the spot. I didn't want to make a sound. Then I bolted. I didn't want to find out who or what was in the bathroom. I ran downstairs and out of the building, and I made sure I locked the door. A couple of weeks later, I thought that I was overworking myself in the job. So I decided to leave the company. I thought the stress and the late nights might have made me hallucinate that night. My colleagues threw me a leaving party. I heard from one of my colleagues that there were rumors about strange goings-on in the call center. Things being moved at night, other sounds coming from different areas of the call center. They thought they might have a ghost in the building. Some of the employees were saying that they had seen a woman in white in the bathroom. I was skeptical, but interested. A few months later, I heard from the same colleague that the mystery of the call center and the white woman had been solved. Apparently, a homeless woman kept creeping into our building through the vents. The building was quite old, you see. My colleague apprehended her and she attacked him. She may not have been of sound mind, I'm told. It's pretty creepy knowing that my fears were justified while working alone, that there was actually someone in that bathroom that night. So I'm really glad I got out of there when I did. I would feel strange scripting this one. I haven't ever written an account of my own experiences. I prefer to take comfort in keeping the true horror at arm's length, translating it, anything like that. However, like most of you listening, we have our own stories to tell. And I thought to myself, what would people want to hear? I have a couple to choose from, but I landed on this one. It's deeply personal to me. I really have only shared it with my family. Well, tonight, I guess you can be my family too for the length of this. But remember, please, keep in mind, this is not a sad story. When I was younger, I was in love, and her name will remain a secret. She was great. I mean, no words will express to you what she was to me, and I will have to settle for similes or metaphors or something like that. We met in our teens, we had so much in common. She could quote you anything from South Park. She could drink a beer faster than me, and she knew horror better than I do now. She's a big film freak, really awesome to be around. It was her who introduced me to so many films, actually. We both grew up in this rural town in England, so, you know, in the pre-video on demand era, we had to just buy DVDs or VHSs. We would just get reviews of films from friends, like cousins, school friends, whatever. And you can thank her for my interest in learning Japanese, I guess. To some extent, there's other stuff, but it was her who showed me such films like Audition, Versus, and The Happiness of the Katakuras. Hilarious, you gotta watch that one day, if you haven't already. She was a big fan of the trauma films, and a guinea pig ones too. She showed me this mad Japanese film called Mermaid in a Manhole. Man, it was rough to watch. I'll never watch that again, I think. Anyway, like me, she liked Japan. But you know, we never were really into like anime or manga or anything like that. It was just more like I don't know, just from a horror point, I guess. She had blonde hair, dark smoky eyes. She was so cool. She spent much of her young life in foster homes, so she was tough and she was fun to be around. She was in a shared house and she had her own bedroom. It was right on the top floor. Amazing. It had this big garden, and when it rained you could open the window and just hear the rain come down. It's cool. That's probably why I put rain in a lot of my videos, actually. She used to hop up on the windowsill to smoke, and she would smoke there. And the same 4-episode DVD of South Park would be on in the background, repeating same episode, same episode, same episode. And there would be nothing but the moonlight filtering in. Fun little memory. She had to smoke on the windowsill because smoking was banned in that house. I was a dork and I was like, should you be smoking? And she was all like, whatever, I'll do what I want. We had a great relationship, but like any teenage relationship, they don't always last. We reconnected now and then, and we always kept in contact, and I think our paths were about to meet again, actually, before she unfortunately passed away. She was not the right age to go. It's really not fair, and I think about it often. I was only at her grave this week. It's not fair. Anyway, she had been dealt a poor hand in life, and a tragically short life it was. Brain tumor. Before she got to do anything in life, really. But anyway, we spoke about going to Japan one day. I left for Japan the year after her passing, and I moved there and I was so ill prepared. I didn't even have bedding, right? So I'm like lying in bed in a new country, severely jet lagged, winters, no blanket, there's no nothing, freezing cold, and I'm just thinking, what the hell am I doing here? My mind's so awake, my body's so tired. And then I felt something. I felt the mattress depress, like the feeling of something putting its weight on it. So almost like a cat or a dog jumped up, but not as jolty as that. It's like someone came along and sat on the edge of your bed. And then I heard a sigh, but not a sigh of discomfort, but like one of kind of amusement. I have to try and recreate it for you. Like that, you know, like that. Anyway, I'm on my side. I hear this. I feel the weight in the bed, and I'm like, I don't want to turn and look. So, you know, you always get jitters when you're in a new place, but then that happens. For me, that's scary. I heard this. I was scared at first, and they're awake, and I'm like, I don't want to turn. I'm not going to do anything. Somebody got in. What's going on? Scared at first, but then start thinking, and I'm like, wow. It was almost like the way she used to hop up on the windowsill. And I lay awake in bed for hours, going from tears to smiles, thinking of her visiting me halfway across the world. Now, you see, it's not really a sad story. It's not really a sad story. And I'm sorry, it's not particularly scary either. But it's my story, and I'm really happy I have that memory. Thanks for listening. This happened to me last December. It's the most frightening thing that's ever happened to me. I began living alone this summer. I managed to get an apartment pretty close to my parents' house. It was a 2-story building. My apartment was on the 2nd floor and in the middle. The rent was cheap, and I loved having my own independence. I went to a party, drank a lot, and got the last train home. I arrived at my station, and I started walking home. The thing about the area I lived in was that it was a little bit shady. It's probably somewhere you don't want to be walking alone at night. There's lots of alleys. I didn't really mind though, since my parents lived close by. I remember I was stumbling along in my tipsy state, searching in my handbag for my keys as I drew closer to my apartment. I was only about 30 meters away from my apartment when I heard something strange. It sounded like there was something continuously banging against something. Had it been the afternoon, it would have been easy to imagine that the sound would be a construction worker or someone doing DIY, but at night, it was odd, and it was getting louder the closer I approached the apartment block. I went up the stairs and turned the corner, and I froze in horror. In front of my apartment there was a woman. She had been banging the door with her fist in a monotonous rhythmic pattern. I could instantly tell that there was something wrong with this person. She looked like a ghost. She looked so pale, exhausted, and frightening. I felt like running off back to my parents' house. I didn't want to tangle with this woman. I stood there shaking for a few horrible moments with my keys in my hand, and then I heard them fall to the floor. As soon as my keys hit the ground, the strange woman stopped her rhythmic banging on my door. I froze. I couldn't pick up my keys. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. She turned her head towards me slowly, and the only thing I can remember after that was the sound of my own footfall coming back down the stairs. I ran as fast and as far away as I could. Finally, I stopped in front of a nearby convenience store. I guess I must have dropped my cell phone while I sprinted. I asked to use one at the convenience store. I don't think I was capable of walking down any more dark alleys or country roads in search of a phone booth. The police came, and they went straight to my place. My keys, my phone couldn't be found, unfortunately, but on the upside, there was no signs of intrusion to my apartment. I stayed with my parents that night. I arranged for the locks to be changed, but I didn't feel like moving back in there. The threat of that woman coming back was too much for me. I don't know what that was about, but I don't want to ever see that woman again. Whenever I think of her, I just can't help but shudder. I was too scared to try and call my cell phone to try and figure out where it was. I got my mum to do it. She called, but no one answered. I stopped the service to that phone a day later. I didn't like it. I didn't want to go back to the apartment. I moved in with my parents, but there was an issue. My parents have a cat, and I have a parakeet. Like I said before, it was a good job my parents lived so close by, so I could go back and forth to feed the parakeet. We can't keep this up forever, though. I don't know why, but I felt like that woman had some sort of grudge against me. This happened when I went to a theme park in Nagasaki with 3 friends. The sun had set in the blink of an eye. We were having a great time riding on the various attractions, eating and enjoying the illumination nights. It had rained, and it was a little damp, but overall it was great. We moved towards an attraction inside a palace. There was a huge line of people waiting to get in. Since I guessed we would be waiting for a while, I took the chance to go to the bathroom. When I came back, I couldn't find any of my friends anywhere since the line of people seemed to have doubled. I called one of my friends, and they answered straight away. "Sorry guys, where are you?" I heard my friend's side of the call. It sounded really noisy, like they were in a crowd of people. "Can you raise your arm so I can see you?" I asked. "Yes, come find us," she replied through intermittent static. I hung up. I tried to find a bit of free space in the crowd to make it easier for my friends to find me. However, I didn't see any of my friends or any arms up in the air. I gave them a call back. "Hey, sorry, I can't find you yet. Have you still got your arm up?" There in a crowd of people, I saw an arm raise up. I pushed through the crowd to get to them, but when I reached the place I thought they were, I couldn't find them. Someone else had their arm up. I was about to call them back when I saw someone with their arm up in a small grove of trees behind the crowd. I wondered, as I grew closer to them, why they had chosen such a strange place to wait for me. I saw 3 of my friends beckoning me into the wooded area. I started to speed up to reach them. They were receding into the tree line. Just as I was about to start jogging, I felt a hand land on my shoulder. "Where are you going?" one of my friends asked. I didn't know what was happening. They had just been waving me over to the trees, and now they were right in front of me. I turned back to the trees and no one was there. I told my friends what I had just experienced. I pointed out that I had even spoken with them over the phone, and they just stared at me confused and showed me their call history. If I hadn't spoken to them, then who did I speak to? And who were the people calling me into the woods? I was so confused, I couldn't enjoy the rest of the time at the park. I couldn't get what had just happened out of my head. Since the park was so big, we decided to take a boat ride back to the entrance. Taking in some of the illumination and scenery should have calmed me down a bit. But it didn't. Something else happened. As we were going down in the canal boat, there was a bridge up ahead, and there were 4 figures stood on that bridge. I can remember it so clearly. I saw all 4 of us on that bridge. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I turned to my friends to see if they were as shocked as I was, but it was as if they couldn't see them. I looked back at the bridge. This time I couldn't turn away. I felt I was frozen in time. These doppelgangers just stared back at me and grinned surreptitiously. Our boat went under the bridge, and I turned around to get another look at them. But when we came out of the other side, they had disappeared. I have no idea if this was some sort of glitch in the Matrix, or if I was looking into a parallel universe or something. I remember how horrifying the whole experience was to me. It was uncanny. And I often see those doppelgangers when I shut my eyes. Was something calling me? I'll update if anything happens. I'm a nurse who works the night shift. There have been 2 occasions when I've been stalked on my way home, and I'd like to share them with you. This happened when I lived in Shikawa, Tokyo. I was returning home on the last train of the night. It was around 12:30. When you get off the train and exit the subway, there's a convenience store at the top of the stairs. My apartment at the time was about 7 minutes away from this store in a residential area. At that time of night, when you get off the last train, the lights on the convenience store are pretty much the only light source in the area. The roads are pretty empty too. Back to the story. I was climbing up the subway stairs and I noticed a man waiting at the top of the stairs staring at me. He kept widening his eyes as he stared at me. He was shifting around restlessly. At that moment, I knew the guy was weird. I ignored the traffic lights and crossed the road. I decided to quickly walk home, since the situation was a bit creepy. As I was walking, I felt a presence behind me. I looked over my shoulder and noticed that weird guy from the subway was following me, and he was closing the distance between us. Without any hesitation or thought, I instinctively started running. I remember running like crazy. I was so panicked and frightened. There was no one on the streets to help me, no passing cars, and it was so dark. I ran up a path into somebody's private garden, pushed the gate aside, and I hid there. I crept around to the back of the house. It overlooked a road. I saw a taxi passing by, and I saw my chance. The taxi driver must have seen how desperate I was, and slowed down and saved me that night. After this event, I moved into an apartment right in front of a different train station. This area seemed much safer, as it had 24-hour taxi ranks, buses, and it was well lit. And it was busy with people, even at night. It was reassuring. I had been living in my new place for about 2 years when something else happened to me. Of course, it took place when I was coming home from my night shift. In those days when I left the hospital to go home, I used to take a quick shortcut through a dark alley. It was there that I am certain that I met the same man again. I quickly headed to the train station. I boarded my train and I saw him again as I sat down. The man was staring at me. He was doing that weird eye-widening thing I saw him do in the subway. He must have followed me onto that train. I had a terrible feeling about this. He kept glancing at me and fidgeting in his seat. The train pulled into my station. I got as close as I could to the doors, and as soon as they opened, I ran as fast as I could. I ran to an exit I knew to be busy. I took off my jacket and tried to blend into the crowds of people. When I found a safe place to hide, I looked over my shoulder. He was there, desperately searching the area. I knew how much danger I was in. Luckily, there was a police box at the west exit of the station. In the following days, I became paranoid that that man might know where I live, or be waiting to ambush me next time I got off at that station. I told the police everything I could about the man. One of the officers seemed to know the man I was speaking of, and described him as perverted. When he said that, shivers went down my spine. There are lots of young nurses in Japan who work late, like I did back then. It's 10 years on, and I still get creeped out thinking about it. As peaceful as Japan is, be careful when walking home at night.